What do you think is the most effective way to hook fish on a fly? Is it knowing the water? Is it getting down to the fish? Or is it something else? Today's guest is a steelhead guide in the Ontario area, and today you're going to find out how he targets big fish in small rivers and how this will help you have more success this year on the water. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Hey, this is Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing podcast. I've been fly fishing since I was a little kid. I grew up around a little fly shop and have created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in this country. I've also interviewed more of the greatest fly anglers and guides than just about anyone out there. Jeff Parks, Ontario fly guide and new fly fisher host, is going to take us into southern Ontario and the Great Lakes with a focus on Georgian Bay. You're going to find out how to find fish in holding water and what he thinks about pressure. He actually likes pressure. He's going to talk about why with this technique actually more people is better. And then we're going to talk about how he does his tackle and how he leads the fly to a fish. Plus, you will get his 4 most important tips on tight lining for steelhead. All right, let's get into it. Here we go. Jeff Parks from Calmwaters Fly Fishing.ca. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, buddy. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. It's fun to be talking fly fishing all the time.
Yeah. This is going to be great. We've been hitting on your neck of the woods, the Ontario area. Recently, we had your daughter on, Alex, in an episode. We'll put a link to that episode or in the show notes. But it's been pretty cool because you guys have a lot of great resources up there. Obviously, steelhead is a big species that you guys focus on. And today we're going to be talking, I think, nymphing today. We're going to dig into that and also talk a little about the new fly fisher, which you're involved with. But before we get there, maybe take us back. I think Alex might have touched on this, but how did you get into fly fishing? What's your first memory? And then we'll jump into the new fly fisher.
Oh, it's funny. I live on a lake, or we actually cottage on a lake. So I was probably about 18. I think it was just before university. And live at this lake called, this funny little name called Puslinch Lake, maybe about an hour outside of Toronto. And in the shed, there was this rod. I asked my dad, I said, because we always had spinning rod. And I said, well, what's this? He said, and he looked at me like I was an idiot. He said, well, it's a fly rod. And I went, oh, well, how does it work? And then he looked at me and says, I don't know. And so I took it out to the dock, and it had this big bushy thing on it. Unbeknownst to me at the time, it was a big caddisfly.
Oh, yeah.
And so I tossed it out, tried to get it out there, and I was trying to get it to sink. And as I was trying to get it to sink, it was obviously making a lot of commotion. And this huge, I shouldn't say huge, but it was about a 2.5-pound largemouth hits it. And just because I was making commotion, and from that day I was hooked.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty funny, and that was a long time ago. I mean, I'm 65, so that's probably, well, if you do the math, that's a long time ago. So there was there wasn't any internet, that kind of stuff. So I was just reading books and just trying to figure it out, and that's how I got into it for fly fishing. So. And then just on a quick note, we were in Vail, Colorado, and my wife likes to ski and I like to fish. So this is about 25 years ago, and I took a guide and there, and normally I've taken a few guides there, but and normally they're just the guys in Colorado are awesome. It was on the Eagle River, and this fellow that I had this one particular year was just, I don't know, he talked about himself too much. It was all about him. He was going to have Tiger Woods on the.
Oh, right.
He was the only guy that would Tiger Woods would go with, and he made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I came back for après ski with Kelly after going out with that guy about 25 years ago, and said, you know what, I can do a better job than that. I'm going to start a guiding company. And so her being an accountant said to me, he says, well, okay, it sounds good, but you're going to have to monetize it. So. I went to the dictionary to look up the word monetize, and went, uh-oh. So that's how I got basically into a lot of the corporate stuff. So my guiding business, there was a lot of, mom and, father and sons, that kind of a thing. But it was really where I made the money in my business was in the corporate world, and getting 10 to 12 people out and hauling people up from outside of Toronto and doing that kind of a stuff.
Gotcha. So when you first got into guiding, your target customer was like CEOs and kind of business, that sort of thing, and then you'd bring in like a group for like an outing sort of thing, like break the
Yeah,
work
yeah.
out.
My pitch was basically, if you guys are taking your customers out golfing, try something different and let us teach you how to fly fish. And they all looked at me and said, "Well, we don't know how to fly fish." And I said, "Well, I know. That's the point. Let us teach you and your customers. Let's give them an experience because your competitors are all taking these people out
Golfing.
golfing.
Yeah.
So everything kind of sort of melts into one, and no one can remember who took them to this certain golf course, blah, blah, blah. But if you take someone out, teach them how to fly fish, they won't forget that. And it basically took off. The financial companies went great. The automotive companies were awesome.
Really?
Yeah, because they were always taking people to hockey games, to baseball games, out for dinner, and it worked out great. So that was my sort of key to success with the guiding. And I always tell young guides who are starting their own company, I said, you'll kill yourself just doing, ones and twos and stuff like that. Get the corporate business and you'll make some cash.
Right. And are you still doing a lot of the corporate stuff?
Yeah, well, a little bit. Obviously, COVID screwed that up.
Yeah.
Everybody's now starting to come back into it, so we're starting to get ramping that back up, which is kind of nice. Last year, before COVID, I was trying to do at least 40 to 50 corporate days a year, and that was pretty easy to do. And then the other 150 days, I would try to get 200 days on the river. So the other 150 were just, your regular drift boat days or walk and wade or teaching, that kind of a thing. So,
okay. So in the corporate stuff, you would bring out, say, a group of 10 people. Would that be kind of like a clinic, or how would that look on the water?
Yeah, it was perfect. We'd meet them on the river for 8:30, and we would obviously we don't do any dry land training. To me, that never made sense when it came to casting and such. We'd always get everybody up in waders, and we'd start in the river right away. And, because you got the current and it's pulling on the fly line, and you really have to, it's a real different experience than just trying to teach somebody to cast on in a field and then move to the water. So we always started in the water, and really it'd be about a 4-hour day. And pretty much after that 4-hour day, everybody's laughing and giggling, and then they'd head off someplace for lunch and chicken wings and beers and chat about the day. And I can't remember any day that wasn't a success with these corporate guys.
Yeah. Right. Wow. That's cool. And are these corporate, was this mostly like Toronto, like local? How are you finding the companies?
Yeah, it was basic sales because I was always in sales and such. But yeah, I just call people up. I'll especially if you hone into one sector like the financial sector, which worked out great. Then you can always say, well, such and such has been using us, which is a competitor of theirs, and they had such a great time. And as soon as they heard that,
Right.
okay,
There you go.
I better hop on this. So you tend to almost get one type of business that really, especially with the automotive guys.
Oh yeah. It's almost like the fear of missing out a little bit, right? Like these guys did
Kinda.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're all buying for the same customer, especially a lot of them are.
Oh,
And
right.
yeah. So anyway, that worked out well. So we did a lot of 75% of my business for guiding was seemed to be teaching, which
Yeah.
I love.
Yeah. Teaching, right. As opposed to just your standard guide trip where you take a couple people out for the day and you try to get them to some fish. It's a little bit different.
Well, exactly. But even in that, if you're taking out a couple people, you always look at someone like, because there's a lot of conferences coming into Toronto and such. And so people would be coming in from California or South Africa or whatever, and you meet them on the river. So you just take a look at to sort of see how, like, I think my daughter Alex was talking about this when you had the podcast with her. I'm a golfer.
Oh yeah.
So I always assess people on their handicap in fly fishing. So I'd take a look at them and say, okay, I see them cast. I'm thinking, okay, they're probably about a 15 handicap, pretty good. But how am I going to teach them to become a little bit better at fly fishing and lower their handicap of fly fishing? And so because, as you're guiding, some days the fish just don't want to cooperate. But if you can help them with, as you're doing that, have a good time, and but just help them to become a better fly angler, that's still a great day.
It is. Yeah, that's sweet. Well, we're going to talk today. I think we're going to talk about steelhead specifically and all that. But I want to hear before we jump into that, just on the new fly fisher. We've been doing a series of episodes with people that were affiliated. Colin passed away, earlier this year, and I'm just
Yeah.
working around trying to touch base with everybody because I want to just share more of that and celebrate kind of what he did. But yeah, how did the new fly fisher? Was this one of those things where Colin, tracked you down, or how did this come to be?
Yeah, no, it was about 5 years ago, maybe, I think. And actually it was Mark Malinek that reached out and said, would you like to do a show? Like not as a host of show, but we'd like to do a show on Calmwaters Fly Fishing. I went, oh, cool. So Bill Spicer, who was the face of the new fly fisher for years and years, he was the host, and we did a show called Small River Euro Nymphing.
Oh, nice.
And that was on the Saugeen River, which is just north of Toronto, northwest of Toronto. And it's an amazing river. It's got Steelhead farther down below, muskie farther down below, and absolute humongous bass. But if you go farther upriver, it's an incredible wild brown trout fishery. And I've had some really good success, obviously tossing lots of streamers. I'm a streamer junkie from the old days. But I also found that the Euro nymphing, or the tight line nymphing, if you want to call it, is so effective there. And these browns can be just huge up there. So Bill and I, we had a great show. And that's how I first got to know the new fly fisher. And then I got to know Colin, who was just an amazing fellow.
Yeah.
And after about 2 years, I did a little bit of work with them for giving them some technical information. And then they said, would you like to host? And a little bit nervous on the hosting.
Yeah.
When I first started, got it up to I think a place called Elk Island Lodge, which is up in Manitoba, and it was a brook trout and pike, but it was a place called God's River, and that was the first place I went to. And it's like being on Niagara Falls, like the water just either below Niagara Falls or above, where the rapids are just huge. So I was just trying to keep afloat on the boat, but that was my first trip.
First trip, okay. And was that small river Euro nymphing, was that focused on trout or steelhead or kind of everything?
No, it was just more on brown trout.
Brown trout.
So
okay.
Yeah, that's all that's up on that one end. And that's how I got to know the guys on all that. And I was just up in Labrador. Actually, the show called Puslinch Lake Lodge is coming out on Saturday. And that's up in Labrador, which is above Newfoundland, and out in the eastern provinces there. And Labrador is absolutely amazing. I'm so ecstatic to have been able to get up that way. So
was that for trout?
Yeah, it was for big brookies, big brook trout. And these brook trout were anywhere from 7 to 9 pounds.
Wow.
And it was phenomenal. It was tough fishing because they didn't have any snow melt, no ice pack there. Just so you know, there wasn't any precipitation in the winter, so the water was low, the water was warm. So we were really working hard for those guys. And then last year I also went to did some Atlantic salmon fishing for Pratt Falls Salmon Lodge, and that was amazing too. So
yeah, okay. And you also do some steelhead fishing. It sounds like that, nymphing, right?
Yeah. So the nymphing is I started out mostly swinging for steelhead, and our rivers are double. They lend well to double hand rods and stuff, spey rods. But I do a single hand spey rod here, and I love that. So I do a lot. But then I started getting into some of the smaller rivers, and we have one river here called the Big Head River, which is up in Meaford. And it's a Collingwood area, which is north of Toronto, a couple hours north of Toronto, but a really fast, smaller river, pocket water everywhere. So if you think of any of the rivers that you see where if you need to walk 10 feet, it'll take you, like across the river, it'll take you maybe 3 minutes to get that 10 feet. That's how this river is. And it just lends so well to a tight line nymphing rig. And so I started doing that about 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And it increases your catch for steelhead by 1,000%.
Yeah. Which lake does the Big Head flow into?
It flows into Georgian Bay, which is part of Lake Huron.
Lake Huron. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's unique that the Lake Huron, the Great Lakes are so interesting because of the way everything's connected and where things are at. But essentially, you're north of Toronto there, And is the Georgian Bay, is that just a normal, basically another lake similar to Lake Huron, or is it different? Why is it called a
Well,
bay? Is it just because yeah, what's the deal there?
that's a really good question. I don't think any Canadian knows,
Yeah, right.
um, to be honest with you. But it's basically a bay, a huge bay of Lake Huron.
Yeah.
But it's different because when you get into Georgian Bay, that's called cottage country for here in Ontario. So Muskoka is a little place called Muskoka is up there,
Okay.
and that's where all the money is.
Yeah, the fancy houses and everything.
Yeah, the $10 million homes.
I gotcha. They're on the lake. They're around Georgian Bay.
All around Georgian Bay and all around in the rivers that are up there and the other little lakes and Lake Joe and all these different lakes. They're absolutely beautiful. But when you get it, if you're boating on Georgian Bay, it is so rocky that you really have to watch yourself and know what you're doing. But it has a lot of fish, and it's all a lot of the steelhead are all wild up there.
Oh, they are.
So yeah, so they're not just stock steelhead. So when they come up in October, especially in the Big Head River, it's a little bit early. You can get them coming up if you get the rain somewhere late September and early October and mid October, and those fish are hot.
Mm.
They're hard. And with the flow of this river, it's a really big flow. It's skinny, so it's like the water's just sort of pushed through in this river. And when you hook one, if you hook, say, 6 steelhead in a day and you land 2, you've done well.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they get themselves wrapped in rocks. There's not a lot of brush on it. Brush gets pushed away because of the flow, but a lot of pocket water. So that, as I said, that just lends so well to the tight line.
Trout Routes is the most comprehensive mapping app for trout anglers. With over 50,000 trout streams, 350,000 access points, public land maps, and more, Trout Routes is the #1 resource for navigating, researching, and exploring trout streams. You can download Trout Routes for free in the App Store today. Just search for Trout Routes on your phone and take your exploration to the next level. That's Trout Routes, TROUTROUTES. Grand Teton Fly Fishing is a premier guide service and fly shop that has access to some of the most coveted rivers and lakes in western Wyoming. Their simple goal is to share their valued resource and have you experience a native cutthroat trout rising to a single dry fly in the shadows of the Tetons. You can check out Grand Teton right now at grandtetonflyfishing.com. Let them know you heard of them through this podcast.
Maybe let's just talk about that a little bit on your setup on the gear and stuff with the tight lines. Maybe talk about that. What's the ideal rod for this, and talk about the leader setup and all that.
Yeah, no problem. A lot of people when they're doing nymphing for steelhead, they, especially when they have an indicator, they like an 11.5 foot or something that's going to, get you out a little bit longer. And the same thing when you're say Euro nymphing for trout, you 10.5 foot rods tend to lend well. But what I find with this river and a lot of faster rivers, that the longer the rod, obviously you're going to have more bend and it's harder to bring them in. So I actually just use a 7-weight 9-foot rod. And I got one, it's a TFO rod that I use, the Axiom 2X. And it's beefed up on the butt section. So you got a little bit more pulling power. If you don't have pulling power on these fish in this river, you can't get them in. They'll just sit in the current and you can't move them. So I just use a 9-foot, whereas a lot of people will use a little bit longer, but I like a 9-foot because it's like when you're fishing for smallmouth bass and you get some of these big hogs. We do a lot of smallmouth bass here also. Sometimes it's a 9-foot, but sometimes even an 8-foot rod, just a little bit shorter, so you can bring these guys in. It's just a little bit easier to do on that. And what I do is I bury the fly line, and I put on a 12-pound Maxima Chameleon, and I put about 30 to 34 feet of that. So that's going to take the fly line right out of the situation. Then I throw on, depending on the flow on something, anywhere from 4, 3.5, well, probably 4 feet, 5 feet of cider tippet. I use the SA. scientific anglers, but Rio has some good lines. So also on the cider tippet. But I'll probably use a 0X for that because I'm just trying to taper it down. The Maxima chameleon it being 12 pound, the cider tippet being 10 pound. The 0X is a 10 pound test. And then I'll probably go anywhere from a 3X or a 4X or 6 pound or an 8 pound on the tippet. So that will be about maybe 2.5 feet, that kind of a thing. So, and then I will use split shot. And, if you talk to any Euro nympher, using split shot is a taboo.
Yeah.
But with steelhead, they've got one thing on their mind. They need to get to the tributaries. They're not looking up. And maybe in the springtime, they're looking up and they see bugs and because they're trout, they're going to be eating. But a lot of times they're looking at the tail ahead of them and, or the fish beside them. And, they're fighting that fish or they're trying to, get to this other fish in front of them. So you need to get the fish down. So you need to lose a lot of flies. And, but they still eat, as you know.
Yeah.
They need to eat. So you need to bump it on their nose. Unfortunately, it is kind of a force feeding kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah. How do you do that with your split shot? Where are you putting the split shot in relation to the fly?
Yeah. Well, I do a 2-fly setup. And sometimes, depending on the flow, if the flow is really big, because if you get into some of these rivers like the Big Head, or a lot of rivers in the States that are, quite turbulent, there's a lot of push up from the currents. And a lot of different currents within, say, a certain run that you're trying to fish. So what I'll do is I'll put that split shot pretty close. It'll be somewhere about 6 inches above to 7 inches. Some people like to go 10 inches. I like to have it just a little bit above the fly. And I do like to use flies. I do use a lot of yarn flies.
As opposed to, say, what, like a bead pattern or something like that?
Yeah, but I do, I use the yarn flies and such, but I do use a lot of fly. Basic pheasant tails with a purple head, purple tungsten head, or a hare's ear, purple tungsten head, or just on a hare's ear, works so well on these things. So even though you got a tungsten head, say on your point fly, and probably just a regular BB split shot, maybe 6 inches above. Then I'll tie, and this is where it gets controversial, where you tie that second fly onto that. I will just tie it onto the shank of the first fly. A lot of people will tie it on the eye of that hook, if that makes sense, if you follow me on that. But because a lot of times what I want to do, if I tie it on the shank of that first hook, about another, say, 8 inches of, say, 6-pound tippet, down to another fly, I will put another split shot between that first fly and that second fly because of the up currents and because I really want to get both those flies right down to the bottom.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So that's your double fly setup. And then was it 4 to 5 feet of cider?
About that.
Yeah.
About 4 to 5 feet. And that just depends on how deep the river is at the time. See you just check the flow, take a look at it. Because what you're not doing with this is that I find with steelheading is that I find I'm more successful if I look at the people pressure. And, when you go to a steelhead river, normally there's lots of people out. And the Big Head River is not one of those rivers where there's 1,000 people out on the river at a time, but there's lots of, say, center pinners and, the guys who are using indicators, they'll be in the pools. But those pools, when they catch those fish, they're going to squirt out a lot of the fish. And some of those fish are going to maybe squirt out and go back downriver, or they're going to go upriver into the really fast stuff. And we catch most of our fish in the really fast rapids.
Oh, really? So you're getting them after if they've been kicked around a little bit.
Right. So that's what I mean. I love, someone, when I have a customer, they'll go, oh, geez, look at all the people out here. And I'm just rubbing my hands on going, oh, I know. Look.
Oh, wow. So the more people, the better for you. This is great.
It is. No, it really is with this, with the tight line. It just gets you excited. You're thinking, oh, look at all those people in those pools. That's fantastic. So then you play the game where you're talking to your customer and you say, okay, if it was, say your customer's name is John. Yeah. And so you look and say, okay, John, if you were a steelhead and, you just got spooked out of that pool and you came upriver, where would you stop and relax? And so we just start analyzing a certain area. Then, obviously you're looking at maybe a little pocket water where water is just pouring over a larger rock or even a smaller rock, or is there a channel here or there? And then we just start hitting that. And a lot of people, especially with steelheading, will go, well, we've done 20 drifts here. Should we move on? And no, you keep at it for a good, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes in a certain spot. And if you don't get anything, of course, then move, because, the steelhead are on the move. But a lot of times they just won't hit anyway until you actually hit them on the
get
in
them
the
right
in the nose.
Yeah, that's how you're doing it. So how do you so you're finding these little runs, and what's your typical depth in these faster water units?
Probably only about 3 feet.
Yeah, so about 3 feet. Yeah.
In that 3 feet. And it's the same thing with swinging, I find too. When you're swinging on some of our other rivers, not to talk about, we've got the Maitland River. That's my other river that I guide on. But when you fish the Maitland River, it's such a large river that you're more, the single hand spay or double hand spay. But where we have the most opportunity for these fish and most action is in and around that 3 foot run. Especially at the end of the run. So it's the same thing with these fish that are in the big head, and when we're nymphing for them, and it's a really fast river, they'll be sitting in 2 feet of water, and they're not that spooky because the rapids is cover for them, and because it's cover for them, they really can't see us that much either, which is kind of nice. So I don't find the steelhead, whereas a brown trout, you really got to creep up on them, or even a big 5 pound smallmouth bass. These big fish like that, you have to be very wary.
Do you find you have to be wary if are the bass and brown trout will they hold in that similar fast water?
Well, not as much the brown. The brown trout, I find they, especially up in the Saugeen River, they really hug the banks. Of the river and those lower pools in the banks. I find them not as much in the pools. I find the ones that are feeding are the ones that are near the banks is what I find.
Like an undercut bank or something like that. Or
undercut.
Yeah. You
got it, the undercut. So, and normally my guiding is, we start around, 7 a.m. kind of a thing or light. And till by the time 3 o'clock comes around, normally a customer's pretty pooped. So we're not getting that. We're not really getting that afternoon unless somebody wants to go in the afternoon, kind of a thing.
Okay, so you don't have to. So as far as these fish with steelhead, and talk about that a little bit on the timing. So you mentioned September. Are you fishing all the way through until the snow starts coming in, or how does that look?
Yeah, actually, I was out on the 29th of December this year guiding. So a lot of our rivers that are just trout rivers, they will close September 30th. But then the other rivers that have steelhead in them, they stay open until December 31st.
Oh, okay. So everything closes.
So, yeah. And then you just hope that it doesn't get too cold that the river, freezes over before that. But that's what we're doing. We're hitting them in the at that time, right? In October, November, you get probably like the 6 pound to 8 pound fish that are coming up. The steelhead that are coming up, and they're absolute bullets. They're full of power and energy because the water's not that cold yet. But then as it transitions into mid or end of November into December, that's when the big boys roll in. And big boys for us, this is not the Skeena or that, but big boys for us are anywhere from 10 to 12 pounds. And that's when they seem to come up in that kind of water and that kind of time frame. And they're a lot of fun too, because if you don't mind the cold, they're a lot of fun. And again, they're always hitting flies. And people use a lot of the squirmy wormies.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you what are if you had to say a top, a few flies for your box, squirmy wormy, what for nymphing, what are those?
Yeah, well, for nymphing, again, I have a couple that are a little bit different. A lot of times I just wrap some purple thread on a probably size 14 caddis curved hook, and with a purple bead head, and just probably maybe a pink collar on it, or maybe a root beer collar. So the purple works really well, and also a green caddis works really well also, like a larvae. Again, with the steelhead, a little bit of for some reason I do like the purple heads, and if it's not that, I'll just use a bullet or what's the word? Gunmetal head
Oh, okay.
color, just
Yeah.
an off black. And if it's really bright, I like to use an off black color because then there's no shine on it.
Oh, yeah.
That might spook them. So
Yeah. Yeah, gotcha. Okay. And then when let's just take it to that run, that 3-foot run or the shallower water. How do you fish? Are you standing there? And how close are you getting the fish? And then are you casting upstream, or talk about how you're getting it down to them?
yeah, well, my whole thing is that you can get pretty close to these things because, like, say you walk into an area where it's lots of rapids and you can see a boulder maybe out 10 feet out. So you get maybe, you can get maybe 5 feet away from that 5 to 6 feet away from that and start working the water above that. But my whole thing is that I try to get people to do, if you're not straight up and down, your fly's not going to be down on the bottom. So I try to teach them to think of the line itself as a laser or a very hot wire. And what you're trying to do is cut through like a piece of butter or something. And you're just trying to cut a line right through through the water with this really hot line. And because if it's lying straight or if it's lying sort of on an angle a little bit, then your fly's not going to get down. But as soon as you go that up and down and lead it a little bit with your rod tip, just lead a little bit with your rod tip, and you can actually almost pull it a little bit faster because nothing's really going to go slower than the current. These nymphs aren't going to be able to go slower, but they might go a little faster. And so almost slightly pull it a little bit faster, but just guide it into the area where you think you can. And, really, it's a very simple method. People try to make the tight line nymphing very technical.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah, it's not technical, but it's part of it is the challenging of the casting. That's one thing with all this weight and the lead. And I guess that's one question I had too on the leader. So you're talking about using the kind of 6 or 8 pound. I mean, I think when you think of trout, you always think they're using really super thin leaders, super long leaders. But are they thin? Are they cutting through the water? Is that the idea here, that you're getting really thin leaders? And could you go down even thinner, down to 4 pound or something even less?
Oh, yeah, you certainly could. But you want to use, obviously, as heavy as you can because you want to bring the fish in as quickly as you can.
Yeah. It's
fun to get the hook up, but you don't want to wear the poor thing out. And, I do see a lot of people saying, well, I took out my 3-weight for the steelhead and we had such a good time and I'm just cringing.
Yeah, 3-weight. So actually a 3-weight rod, not a 3-weight spay rod, but a 3-weight
just a 3-weight rod,
yeah.
kind of thing. And I'm just cringing for these poor things. But no, if I could use a 12-pound tippet, I probably would just to get it in. But this really 6 or 8 is the best way to go. And when it comes to Euro and tight line nymphing, to be really successful, because most people, as I said, they catch the fish in more the places where you think they would be, in the pools and all that. But when you're working the rapids, you really have to know how to read water. So when I'm teaching the Euro nymphing or the tight line nymphing, I keep calling it Euro. I don't really want to call it Euro, but the tight line.
Yeah.
I'm teaching almost 50% on how to get that fly down there, but 50% of the time is where the fish are. Because, if you sounds silly, but if you fish where the fish are, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so reading the water, especially in fast pocket water, it just looks like a blur to most people. And, when you really take a look at it and say, okay, there's a rock there, there's a channel there, there may be a ledge there, you really have to learn how to read water. More you learn how to read water in that specific situation, boy, you'll be really, really successful with this type of steelhead fishing with this tight line style.
Yeah, find the ledges, because the fish are going to be in a big run or a rapid. Mm-hmm. They're going to find the slot, right? That's the thing. If there's one slot, if you could find that little area, then that's your best bet. Although,
yeah. Well, big pie. And you know what? There are slots where they will hang in all the time. I've got my 5 best spots on this one river, and they're basically, I'll say to somebody, I say, listen, I can't guarantee a fish, but put it here.
Yeah, right.
And almost, let's say 7 times out of 10, there'll be a fish there. And there may be fish there. They just might not even on those other 3 times, but they always sit in these certain slots. And these certain slots are so small, and people walk by them all the time. And once you get to know them, You just keep going back, and each flow you fish it better or fish it different with each flow. Just maybe an extra split shot, or maybe a different fly to get it down, or sometimes maybe only one fly because maybe the second fly, because it's such a small spot, is going to kind of spook them. So it's really, as small of a brain they have, they're pretty darn smart.
Are you, when you're getting it down, are you kind of feeling like bump? Are you bumping that split shot all the way down through the slot?
Kind of. Try not to bump it too much. My theory is that when a fly goes in, the fish, even though they're looking at the tail in front of them, probably see it maybe coming, maybe say from 8 feet away. So if it constantly gets stuck on the bottom, they're probably thinking it's nothing really real. So you got to find that, if you can get that perfect drift and that's why the cider tip works so well, because you've been catching this one rock constantly. So when you put it in, you lift it up a little bit at that spot, then you put it back down, lift it up, lift it down, and you're just mapping out the bottom. And with a migratory fish, they're on the bottom.
Yeah.
Normally, they're normally somewhere around that bottom area. And I find too is that I get people to try to, when they put the fly up, try to get it up as much as you can, and then lift it up quickly so you get a vision on that cider tip, because it's hard to see, especially in some light. And then try to get the maximum drift. Try to get 20 feet of a drift or 25 feet of a drift, which you can with this stuff, and that'll really help. But always, if you get caught, think it's a fish. Just set on everything. And you're going to lose flies.
Yeah, exactly. Or is the cider, so if you're in a spot, you said sometimes you can get within 5 feet. I'm picturing cast upstream or a little bit, drop it down into where you think the fish is at. And then you mentioned 25 feet. Are you letting it drift down below you and then down is further down?
Yeah, big time. You've always got a certain amount out. It's like, like say you've got, I don't know, 10 feet or 12 or 15 feet of line out kind of a thing. So, you send it out in upriver and, just keep going. And then as it's going past you, you're lowering the rod tip to keep that fly at that same level and lean with it. Almost be athletic is what I try to tell people. Get on the balls of your feet. Just don't stand there and, think about what you're going to have for dinner that night. Which I do a lot of times anyway.
Yeah.
But, try to be ready for a strike at all times. And I find that's the same thing with a spey rod. You talked about, I got a couple of buddies. I got a buddy here that's one of the most amazing steelheader, Jim Bonney. And he catches so many fish on a spey rod is because every swing he swings, he feels he's going to get a fish. Everyone. And so he's ready and he's swinging that fly correctly and that kind of a thing. So it's the same thing with this, is that just think you're going to get a hookup every time, and don't be, just be ready. And if you're not catching your fish, it doesn't mean, some days you're not going to catch a fish. I mean, you're not always going to catch a fish. But if you do everything possible, then it doesn't matter if you don't catch a fish. At least you tried and did everything.
Right. What's the hookup like on, the fish? Are these mostly subtle takes, or how do you know?
Mostly subtle. Because it's like they suck it in and they don't even know. And then all of a sudden, it's just a boom, boom.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll get a slam on a fly like this, but it's not like a spey where, you get a slam and your rod is almost taken out of your hands, that kind of a thing. It's more, if you think of it, with the fly going down into a certain little channel, and a fish just opens his mouth and takes that fly, it probably doesn't even know it's hooked for the first 2 seconds. But as it's getting tighter with the flow and you give it that little yank, then you just feel that bump, bump. And because you're tight line, which is nice, as soon as you feel that, you just let go of your trigger fingers that you've got on that line, and it's off, and you're off to the races.
Yeah. And are you are these fish running on you, getting down into your fly line and stuff like that, or are you keeping them pretty close?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, all the time. And again, think of a fast river, a fast fish that's maybe 8-9 pounds, got lots of energy. It hits it. I always say to people, you got to let a fish run. So let it run. And a lot of times especially with the flow on these rivers, we'll land a fish maybe a quarter of a mile down the river.
Downstream.
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt for a guide.
Right. You gotta you're chasing them with your client.
You're just right. And if it's one of those days where, and we can have on this particular river and some other rivers, we can have days where you're hooking up to 20, 23 fish or
Wow.
24 fish. It's like some days are magical.
My gosh.
And, you almost, when you get one of those days, I almost feel like pushing the customer out of the way and give me that rod. This is, you're having too much fun. But, yeah, you can have some magical days. You can have some tough days. Of course, but you can have some of those days that but a real typical day on the Big Head, realistically, you can get anywhere from 6 to 10 hookups.
Yeah, hookup. So that might be maybe a fish on for a few seconds sort of thing, or maybe longer.
Yep, you got her. And they'll run down and or upriver, but mostly downriver because they're they don't live in the river, so their whole mindset is screw this, I'm going home, and home is the lake. So they'll just take the water and take the current, and just go. And they'll snap you off. So,
yeah, gotcha.
And, even though you're trying to let them run.
I just returned from an incredible 5,000-mile road trip to Wisconsin with my family, and our Project M from 4-Wheel Campers allowed us to see things and go places in comfort that we didn't think possible. For over 50 years, 4-Wheel Campers has been building tough, lightweight pop-up campers designed to fit almost any truck bed, giving adventurers like me the freedom to camp anywhere my truck can go. The pop-up design can be set up and taken down in under a minute. The interior has a slide-out bed to maximize the space, and the Project M allows you to keep your truck's tailgate so you can still use your truck as a truck whenever you need. 4-Wheel Campers also offers building campers like the luxurious Orvis Edition for those seeking a little extra comfort outdoors. If you own a truck and are curious which model best suits your needs, you can visit 4wheelcampers.com right now. And when you're there, you can customize your own camper, find a dealer nearby, and explore upcoming events to see one in person. Elevate your outdoor experiences with 4-Wheel Campers. Wow, this is cool. Yeah, so, what else are we missing here on the tight line Euro nymphing kind of for steelhead? Is it very similar to trout, just with bigger gear? Is that kind of what we're doing? I guess you're adding split shot too, so that's a little bit different than your typical Euro nymphing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of times a lot of guys don't use trout. I just find brown trout are awesome, but they're spooky, finicky, and I don't use as much split shot. I use maybe a larger tungsten head, or sometimes the water really isn't as high also when you're going for brown trout. And right. The flows are smaller, so you really don't need the split shot as much. And those fish are looking up. So, those fish are looking up and looking for bugs, brown trout. So, you can be in different columns of the water when you're doing that kind of tight line for them. But with the steelhead, I just find you got to get it down, and you got to read the water, be very, very good at reading water. That is for any kind of fishing, but more so I find for the migratory fish. And the same thing with spay. You want to be swinging where the fish are. And such. So, obviously boulders are the key.
Yeah, boulders. So that's the key to reading water, is finding if there aren't slots find boulders or anywhere where the water is broken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of a thing. And the same thing with spay also. A lot of people try to slow the fly down too much. Whereas I tell them, well, let's, instead of doing a upward mending on your fly line, let's do a downward mend and get that fly ripping through the current. And a lot of times that'll get a steelhead, even a lazy one, getting up and going for that fly. It's just like if someone's throwing in a spinner or a rapella or whatever, let's say a spoon or something like that. If you don't reel that in quick enough, it's going to get stuck.
Yeah.
So, when guys catch a lot of steelhead with spoons and that kind of stuff and hardware, so those things are moving pretty quick. So, your fly should be moving pretty quick too. And that's why I said on the Euro nymphing is that sometimes move that fly a little bit faster than the current. It's just an anomaly for these fish to see that. If it's going slower, I find that doesn't work at all. But if it goes a little bit faster, not a lot faster, but just goes a little bit faster than that current, get that fly just ripping a little bit. That may entice some of these things that are lethargic to come out and to hit it.
That's awesome. How do you, once you get the fish on and it's and you're getting ready to land it, talk about that. Are you using a net, or what's that look like?
Yeah, always using a net, and that's the most stressful time for a guide.
Yeah. Well, what's the net? What's your go-to? What type of net do you use?
I'm trying to just
Regular hoop net with a big
yeah,
net.
just basic. I lose nets all the time. I leave them on the river.
Yeah.
It's just a pain. I'm always thinking, oh, I left my river, and I know exactly where I left it, but that could be like 3 miles upriver, and there's no way I'm going back for it.
Really?
So
yeah.
yeah, no, screw it.
Yeah.
So someone will have a nice net, but I just a good sturdy net. Anything that's not going to hurt the steelhead or hurt the fish, that kind of a thing. But that's also as I said, someone says, well, do you have any stress in your life as a guide? And that's the only time I find when it's game on and you've got, a big corporate customer or someone who hasn't fished and they finally get a day out. They've been, working their butt off. And now you got to get that fish into the net. And if you make a mistake and it's gone because you hit the line or whatever, you'll get a stare from the other end.
You got to get a picture of that one. Are these wild? You mentioned wild. Are there hatchery fish in here? Or are these mostly all wild?
Yeah, there's a few. Yeah, a few that come in that are hatchery and stuff. But a lot of the ones that are coming up here are wild. So that's a really cool thing to see. And we're obviously catch and release. Being an ambassador of the river.
Yeah. Can you keep fish?
Yep. Yeah, you can keep fish on this river.
So people are killing fish and eating steelhead.
They are, which is just pains me to see.
Yeah.
And just pains me to see. And especially, when you see one guy in the morning who took 2 out, and then you see him in the afternoon, took 2 out. It's a killer. So it's just like, I'm sure a lot of rivers out there, North America, and in the world where, there's nothing wrong with keeping a fish and at all. There's nothing wrong. No. I'm not one of those preachers. But if you just take too many, that's wrong. But steelhead, to me, they should be catch and release, I think. And same thing with a large smallmouth. Yeah. You look at somebody who's taken a 5.5 pound river smallmouth out, and that thing is 25 years old for a river smallmouth. You're thinking, oh, that's just wrong. Smaller ones, okay.
Is that how old the smallies are? They get up to that old? They're 25 years old?
Yeah, river smallmouth, they grow very slowly. And I think you had Rob Heel on a little while ago, and he talked about the Saugeen River. The Saugeen River, which I was saying we did a lot of stuff on for the brown trout farther up, but those bass in there, they get humongous. And there's some 6 pounds, but they're fat, but they grow so slowly. So, some of them will be anywhere between those larger fish, anywhere between 18 and 25 years old. So they've seen a lot. They've seen a lot. And so they're a neat fish. And the other river that I fish for smallmouth is the Maitland, and that's Maitland is still flows also into a place called Goderich, which is also goes into Lake Huron. But this river is it's a great steelhead. It's a swinging river. I think I talked about it, but it's a fantastic smallmouth bass river, and it's a sight fishing river. So it's like fishing for bonefish.
Oh wow!
So you'll sit there and you can see, standing as you're walking in a certain run or a certain small area, you can see 2 or 3, 4 or 5 pound smallmouth, and try to get those. That's technical and it's fun.
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool. Nice. Well, let's start to take it out of here. This is our casting and comfort segment today, brought to you by Heated Core. And Heated Core, their tagline is stay out longer and stay comfortable with Heated Core's battery-powered layers that provide consistent warmth through the year. And we had an episode actually on with Amber where we talked about this. And so shout out to heatedcore.com. They're one way you can stay warm out there. I think that's a challenge, right? How do you keep your arms and everything from freezing? So what's your tip in the winter? So you talked about being fishing up through December. How are you staying warm out there? What's your big tip there?
What's my tip there?
Are you wearing because it's cold, right? You guys get some cold weather, don't you, when you're fishing?
Big time. I'm pretty lucky. I don't. My legs don't get cold. I mean, you wear the thickest zip up waders you can. With regard to that, good. What I do find spikes on I have spikes in my boots, and of course those really work well.
Right. So that is one thing you don't want to fall. Like falling in the water would not be a good day. Have you had that? Have you had some clients have that happen to them?
Oh yeah. Actually, it's more me going in.
Oh, really? You going? So how do you deal with that when you go down and maybe you get water in your waders?
Yeah, you just have to grim and bear it, that kind of a thing. But a lot of times, again, and I'm sure other guides are the same way. Your number one goal is to keep your customer happy and dry.
Yeah.
So if you see a customer going in, a lot of times the reason I've gone in is because I've kept him from going in, but then I've slipped and gone in myself.
Yeah.
And that kind of a thing. And when you go in November, that's a pretty crazy spot. But I also, when you're in that kind of water, I always fish and take a look at what's below you. So if you do go in, okay, where am I going to get out, kind of a thing. And if it's too precarious, or if it's really looks kind of a dangerous, I'll just move on, because it's only a fish, and there's another fish that'll be just farther up into another easier spot. But what I tell anybody when they're especially winter steelheading is always bring a change of clothes and have it in your car for that kind of a reason. That's always key, and a little pair of gloves, but your hands are going to get warm, or they're going to get cold. Doesn't matter how you look at it.
Yeah, you are. Well, I find the one thing, I love the fingerless wool gloves, like just your basic, thin, nothing big. But I find that for some reason the tips don't get quite as cold, and you know what I mean. So I love the fingerless gloves. I'm not sure about you.
Right, those are good. My hands get cold, but I'm always having to do a lot of stuff with changing flies, putting split jets on and such. So I don't really use. I don't really use gloves that much. I'll just put them in my pockets. I'm not really carrying a rod. So, but yeah, for someone who's fishing, just a small fingerless gloves, they're the best. Hat, as I said, change of clothes is the best.
Yeah, those are all great. Those are all awesome tips.
Yeah.
Well, so that's some winter tips. And then what about, give us a few, let's say, talk about tightline nymphing, Euro nymphing for steelhead. Let's talk about that. Just give us like 2 or 3 top tips. Somebody's thinking about going fishing. Maybe they're not going to get a guide, but they want to do this. What are you telling that person to help them maybe?
Number one is reading water. So if you're steelhead fishing, what you want to do is, and I know this sounds like, a scene from Caddyshack, in Caddyshack, where the guy, Chevy Chase, is saying to the guy, be the ball, Danny, be the ball.
Oh, yeah.
And, that kind of a thing. Well, if you're in a certain run, you have to look downriver and say to yourself, okay, if I was a steelhead, you got Jeff the steelhead, I'm coming up this river. Where would I go? How would I figure this out? So that sometimes will help people if they visualize themselves as a steelhead. I know that sounds really stupid, but if you visualize the steelhead coming up, where's he going to sit? And I bet if you look at a certain area especially when I'm with the customer, and we look at an area that's maybe 100 or let's say 50 feet of a river. We can point to, with our rod tips, there'll be one probably there, there'll be one there, there'll be one there, right, because it's there and that. And so, again, fishing where the fish are is really, really key. And so once you get to where you sort of think the fish are, then you start trying to figure out how to get 10 out of 10 drifts in this spot where in a row, where this spot where you think the fish is. So a lot of people say if the water's pouring over a rock and you got to get your fly just above that rock in a certain place, so then it filters into where you think the fish is. What I tell people a lot of time is don't try to just hit that spot like on a dime. Always overshoot it and then pull it back in so it gets to that spot. And then that way, if you overshoot it, you can drag it back into the spot, and you can virtually get 8 to 9 to 10 out of 10 perfect drifts. So the more perfect drifts you can do. So that's always a good key. So you're visualizing where the steelhead's going to be. You take that spot, you start hitting your fly in amongst that, and set on absolutely everything.
Set on everything. What's that set look like? What is it like? Is it just like a trout set?
Just a trout, just a very small trout set. Because once you do if you do like a big largemouth bass trout or set, you're going to rip it right out of the thing's mouth. But the steelhead mouths are hard. But once you feel something, pull and just a tap, because once that happens, the fish are going to react and they're going to hook themselves.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to get that motion into that fish. So that's the key. So again, fish where the fish are, set on absolutely everything, and work with your weight. If you don't think you're down, then put another split shot on.
Yeah. And you know you're down just by the fact that you want to be touching the bottom occasionally, like, or
big time.
If you're not feeling the bottom at all, that means put another split shot on.
You got it. You just make sure and there's three ways of getting, or a couple ways of getting a fly down. You can put more weight on, and in regular casting, you can put weight on. You can send your fly up farther, or you can mend. But we're not mending. That's how to get a fly down to the fish. Three ways to do that. But with this, you don't mend. So really, you either put more split shot on, or get your fly up farther upriver so it has more time to sink originally, and then that's how you're going to get that fly down. And also, you have to have that. The number one thing is to have that fly, or your sight or tippet, straight up and down. If it's on any kind of an angle, your fly's not going to get down. It's just going to get caught up into the current. So it's pretty basic when it comes to that. So, and again, just to go through that, you got to read the water is your best bet. You got to make sure that you get 8 to 9 to 10 out of 10 drifts perfect in that certain run, and you've got to play with your weights on your tippet. So you add more weight, or you don't add more weight, or put the fly up a little bit farther upriver to get the fly down, and set on everything, and you're good to go.
Perfect. Good. Well, that's good. And we got a couple more take us out of here. And we talked about the new fly fisher at the start. Do you have, I always love to hear you mention a couple of places on the new fly fisher. How does that look for you? Are you guys looking out? Do you know exactly where you're going this year, in the next couple of years?
No, I haven't got a clue.
Oh, no clue. Yep.
Yeah, that usually comes in around April.
Oh, April. Okay.
Yeah, so find out when what lodges are wanting us to come up, or where we're going.
That's cool. So Mark's doing that right now. Mark's kind of behind the scenes setting up all that stuff, and then do you typically do like 2 or 3 trips, or how many trips are you doing per year?
Yeah, I think I've done 3 trips a year, which is awesome. And maybe I always say to Mark, I'd love to do more. You just let me know if you want me to, keep sending me out. I just did a show, a Steelhead show with Mark. That'll be coming out probably in April. Yeah, we were in November. We did another river called the Nottawasaga and the Saugeen. So I got some fish on the Spey, on the Saugeen, and we got some fish on an indicator. But I got to tell you, Mark, can he fish?
Oh, really? Yeah. I remember talking to him because we had him on the podcast, and you could hear, I think I asked him some question about, I think it was about the fishing versus just the experience. And I said something stupid like, God, isn't fishing more? It's just almost as much about being out there and experiencing it. And right, is that almost more than the fish? And Mark was like, no, I don't agree with that. It's the fishing for me. He's like, he's a hardcore, right?
He loves his fishing, and you know what? He's tough to be on the boat with, because he's just like, he's catching fish all the time, and we're on the Nottawasaga River. That just sounds so Canadian,
right? Nottawasaga. How do you spell that? Nottawasaga.
Nottawasaga. Oh God.
Wow.
Well, however it sounds, I guess that's how you spell it. But it's a slower river, and I like indicating, but I've just never been my favorite thing to do. But I hadn't even got my fly on, and he had a fish on. When we got on the river, I was just still tying my fly on. He's already got a fish on. He's unreal. He can find fish from underneath a bus. Just an amazing, amazing fisherman, and that's why he does so well when he goes to all these places like Chile and all the other places. So he's as I said, he's a lot of fun to fish with. He's amazing, but he's a tough competitor.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, cool. So that's Mark. So that's what you have coming up. Let's talk a little bit more. So just the area, or for you, are you going to be, is most of your traveling, I guess you're guiding. So when does that start for you? When do you start picking up just your normal guiding?
Yeah, I guess once the rivers start busting up, we'll start getting out probably end of March, or maybe April, that kind of a thing. So right now I'm actually heading to Sedona, Arizona.
Oh, really? There you go.
Yeah, which is cool. And apparently you can do some fly fishing there. So I'm probably, my wife and I are going to head out in a couple of weeks, and we're going to go for a couple of weeks. So I'm going to see if I can find some fish there, and then maybe to Florida. We were going to go to New Zealand, but we'll probably head back down to Florida.
Okay. And are you when you're doing the Sedona or the Florida thing, are you kind of just flying in, staying in hotels? How does that look?
Well, we had a timeshare there. When I say
Nice.
the word it was on Fort Myers Beach, and we were probably going to spend quite a lot of the time, but that got blown away by Hurricane Ian a couple of years ago. Yeah. So, and that was a great spot. Fort Myers Beach was just amazing. There's lots of snook that would cruise the beach, and there's a place called Lover's Key that I would head into, especially in November. And I'd get in a kayak and I'd go tarpon fishing because these anywhere from 20 to 40 pound tarpon would be laying in there.
The baby tarpon.
Yeah, the baby tarpon, but they were so quick, and you're in an area where it's like 30 feet wide, and you're in a kayak, and there's alligator signs everywhere.
Oh, really?
And I hate to say it, I am 0 for 14.
Oh, there you go. So you've had them on though.
Oh, I've had them on, but I just can't. They get caught up in the mangroves.
Oh, the mangroves, right?
Yeah. So and then they get ripped off, kind of a thing. So it's just I had one to the hand, almost touched it, but I lost it. So I'm 0 for 14. So I suck at tarpon fishing.
That's it. Well, I've heard some, the steelhead is not too different. I mean, I think you're in an area the way we're talking today. I mean, you catch a lot of fish, but you hear some people, and even my brother, I remember he had this story on when he was a younger kid, and he told, I think he wrote about it on our website, but I think he did the same thing. It was like 0 for 12. It was his first. He was probably 12 years old, and he was out there swinging flies, and he lost 12 steelhead in a row. And he on the last one, I think he almost threw his rod. And so it's that feeling where, it can happen to anybody, but then finally you land one, right? Same thing for you. That tarpon, I think probably once you land that next one, you're going to be like, you'll have it dialed in probably. Then it'll be
big time. Well, you know what, as they always say, we learn from our mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So if someone loses a steelhead, like their first two, and they probably know what they did.
Right.
They probably had their left hand on the reel, didn't let the reel move, or that kind of a thing. So we learn by our mistakes, and we only become better. Sounds so cliche-ish, but that's the way I look at it every time I lose a fish. It'll make me better.
Yeah.
As I'm swearing.
Totally. Good stuff. Well, this is good. Talk here. You mentioned TFO. What about reels? Or do you have a specific reel brand you like to use?
Reel? Did you say?
Yeah, like a reel.
Yeah. Well, I actually I am a dealer for TFO.
Oh, you are? Okay. Yeah, TFO's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I use mostly TFO stuff, and they're great. As I said, their Axiom 2X rod is just a cannon. It's awesome, and they got some great reels and such. But I've used a lot of reels in the past. But we do a lot of stuff with Orvis with the new Fly Fisher also.
Oh, okay.
And so the Helios and even the Clearwater rods are amazing, but the reels for Orvis are top notch. I love them.
Yeah, Orvis is great. Yeah, Orvis is awesome.
Yeah.
And TFOs too. I mean, that's a great story. We've had a number of episodes with, TFO from the founder down to, I guess the one
lovely.
person we never got was Lefty Cray. But I mean,
Lefty Cray.
the TFO story is cool because of the way, the founder kind of put that all together, and brought all these, Lefty and Ed Jaworowski, like these people in, some of the best to basically work with the company, and that's obviously helped them.
Oh, big time. I mean, you got Flip Pallet and all these names, and they're just not names. These guys are intelligent, and they're amazing fly fisher, and they're pioneers.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Well, this is cool, Jeff. This has been a lot of fun. I feel like we definitely talk a lot about swinging flies, so I love getting a little nymphing episode in here. And and really, it's it's steelhead, but it could be nymphing for other species, right? I mean, it's just fishing at the end of the day. Do you have anything else you want that we didn't talk about today? Any last words before we head out of here?
No, I don't. I think we touched on it quite a bit. I think everything, as I said, if I had my way, I'd swing a fly for steelhead. But I got a hidden passion for this tight line. I really do. When you touch some of these steelhead, and you are, say, 6 feet away from the hookup,
yeah,
and it just blows the water in front of you, that's just an insane fight. And that is probably one of the most exciting moments, is that initial hookup when you are tight lining. And just to try to keep it on for, I don't know, 3 seconds, that initial 3 seconds, it's tough to do. So it's fun. I love them both, but hard to say.
Yeah, me too.
But I appreciate the time to chat. I know I probably babble too much, but I love talking fly fishing.
Oh yeah, no, it's good. We'll keep up with it. We'll send everybody out to calmwatersflyfishing.ca if they want to connect and check in on trips and things like that. I mean, you're
awesome.
You're right there. You guys are kind of just across the border, so I mean, I think it's probably pretty easy. Do you guys get a few people from the States heading up to fish up there on your trips and stuff like that?
Oh, very much so. Actually, for some reason, a lot from California.
Oh, really? Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why. It may be because they're coming in for conferences, maybe because there is a lot of tech in Toronto and Waterloo area here. So maybe that's it. But I do find a lot from, a lot in there. Not as much from the border.
Oh, right. Yeah, because they got their own right down there. They've got their own stuff.
Yeah, they got their own good stuff and whatever. But that and a lot of people from Italy and again South Africa. It's a funny demographic. So
that's awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Nice. All right, Jeff. Well, we'll be in touch. And thanks again for all the wisdom today and the great episode. And we'll check back and talk to you soon.
Awesome, buddy. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. There you go. Tight line nymphing. That's not swinging. That's tight line nymphing with Jeff. If you love this episode, please check in with Jeff. Let him know you heard about this podcast. You heard about him on this podcast. That would be amazing. And if you're interested, pick his brain, see if he has availability for a trip. All right. If you haven't yet, please follow that show. As always, if you're new to it, you can do that really easy on any of your apps. I want to give you a quick reminder. We are going to be heading out to Argentina, Golden Dorado. We all hear about it, Golden Dorado. Take a look at this fish. It looks kind of like a salmon in some ways. I think there's no resemblance or no evolutionary resemblance or connection, but they look similar with their big head. But check out Golden Dorado. We're going to be looking to head out there, and we are putting together a trip right now. So if you're interested in this, you can go send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, and I'll let you know what we have as far as availability for spots left on that one. Golden Dorado with Set Fly Fishing. Check it out. Check in with me. All right, I can get rolling here. Hope you have a great morning. Hope you have a great afternoon, or if it's evening, wherever you are in the world. I appreciate you, and hope you have a wonderful evening. We'll talk to you very soon.